Hey everybody, it is my great pleasure to welcome back to the show a fan favorite, Mr. I'm going to call you Lord because we know he likes to be called Lord. Lord Adam Quiney, Mr. Adam Quiney, back for round two. We talked a year and a half ago when you were just coming out with your book. We spent some time getting to know you, and I wanted to have Adam back on the show. One, because he's just a great dude. Got a lot of good feedback on that episode. And two, he's into a lot of cool stuff that I know we can learn from, both in the way he thinks about things, the way he looks at things, and some of the things that you and your wife, who I've also had on the show with our mutual friend Laura Westman, some of the things that you two are creating together around from a business and experiences and all that. So Adam, I'm so glad to have you back. I'm glad to have an open conversation with you where we just get some of your wisdom and see what's up with you and teach the audience something and entertain, as we always will, and not spend too much time on gaming, because not all of my guests are gamers, and I'm a huge gamer and Adam's a huge gamer as well. So Adam, thanks for coming back. Bit of a trap.
We're both looking at that like really nice bubbling tar pit over there. We're like, we should probably not jump into that right now. And
hey, look at if you're a motorcycle, you're like, don't point your wheel towards the video games. So Adam, as we get deeper into the conversation, what are you playing? No, I'm kidding. Adam, welcome back. Glad to have you on.
Thanks, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So Adam, first of all, for those who didn't tune in the first time, where are you joining us from, and anything else you want people to know about you?
Sure. So I live in Victoria, British Columbia, which is an island off the west coast of Canada. Ooh, fun facts. Let's see. I'll just shoot a few from the hip. Since we talked to games, I love Street Fighter 6. It's probably one of my favorite games right now. I'm in the top 3% of the players in the world. And
we're not playing because you'll kick my ass.
Yeah, it's not that much fun for my friends, they find.
No, that does not sound fun. I'm too competitive. I'd be like, oh, that sounds great.
Yeah. Oh, it'll be neat. I'll learn. We also I really love this game called Magic the Gathering, and there's a few friends that in our group called the Forge, which we can talk about it later if it feels appropriate. But
yeah, for sure.
We do a retreat in Costa Rica in January. That's where we're coming towards, and so one of the members of our leadership team was like, let's play Magic. And I was like, totally. So we got there, we set it up, and everyone was like, this is going to be so neat. I can't wait to watch. And very quickly they were like, this is like chess times 1,000. These people are huge nerds, and there's nothing for me here. They're having fun.
So for the one person listening, everybody come back we're not talking about Magic the Gathering today. That's what they call a huge buzzkill. I am not a Magic the Gathering player. I've seen it, and it seems a little slow for my taste as well. The card thing, but I understand people love it. A lot of people love it for sure. It's a huge brand.
Let me give you the I'm not trying to sell it on you, but like, here's what's amazing about this game is that it was created in around 94, 93. So that's, what are we at? Like 30 years. So imagine a game that's been actively played and in active development for 30 years. And then just the depth of like what would be available in a game. It's not a game that's just been around like Monopoly, but hasn't changed much. It's been evolved and built on. And so that makes a very rich kind of a space in which you can play, which is very, very fun for people, at least like me.
Yeah. So there's an affiliate link in the podcast here. It's a link to Adam's retreat to go to Costa Rica, and then they just play Magic the Gathering. That's it. That's all you're going to do. It's a week of just playing Magic the Gathering, but not the electronic version.
That's amazing.
While in Costa Rica.
Yeah,
some people are probably going, whatever it costs, I'm in it, and everybody else is like, no. But that's what you want. That's what you want in your offers, polarizing offers. You want it to be, you want to be the thing. But I think this would be a good lead, and I'm kidding aside, to talk about Costa Rica, and specifically one of the things that you and your wife are passionate about, and that's plant medicine. And we haven't really talked about, on this show, I haven't talked to anybody at length about this. I've mentioned it a few times. I'm really interested in it. I think you and we covered it briefly, but I'd like to get some education from you, Adam, on the plant medicine space. It's obviously blowing up big time. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people doing work around that. And there seems to be some rumblings here in the United States of potential legality coming in certain states around certain mushrooms, maybe some ayahuasca at some point as well. Don't know what's up in Canada, but, Professor, take us away on what you think that those listening would want to know or need to know about what's up in the plant medicine world.
Yeah, so I'll give like a really general kind of overview, and then you can help us get specific with like questions that show up.
Yeah.
So the plant medicines that I've worked with psilocybin. Many of us have. Psilocybin is probably usually the way most of us initially get into this work. And then
And that comes from
that's
mushrooms. Is
right.
that a
Yeah. Magic
yeah,
mushrooms are
that
their kind of
magic
street
mushroom?
name or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, which is sort of, and then LSD is like a synthesized version, a chemical version of that.
Yep.
And then, but the plant medicine that I really am committed to and that I would relate to as like significant part of my teachers is ayahuasca. And
Mm-hmm.
so ayahuasca is a psychotropic brew, kind of like a tea or like a beer, I guess you can think of it. It's made from two plants. One is a vine called ayahuasca, and one is the leaves of a plant called the chacruna, and they're both from the Amazon. And they get brewed together, and they create this rich, thick, kind of molasses-like substance that you drink. And that medicine has been worked with for millennia. You know, the last I heard was like thousands, maybe 5,000 or so years. Like the tribes along the Amazon have been working with this medicine for a very, very, very long time. And for the longest time, this medicine was really held sacred, and it's always held sacred, but like protected, and it was sort of like the West, so to speak, isn't really ready for this. And the Taitas, which means the fathers, are the ones that hold this kind of lineage. Recently started getting, recently within the last kind of, we could say 20 to 50 years, started getting messages like now's probably the time. It's time to start bringing this forward. And so those of us that are alive at this time are really fortunate because we can start to work with this medicine. And what ayahuasca does is very similar to what you and I do as a coach, and what anyone who's worked with an ontological or like a coach that works below the level of just what you're doing. And it does three particular things. The first is that it supports you to see yourself for who you are, free from your story. So another way to put that is to see our blind spots. Because typically we're like, I hate people that are thieves. And then someone's like, yeah, but you're stealing. And I'm like, but it's different because I'm doing that because my child needs the blah, 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 or because they stole from me earlier. And so it's justified. So that's my blind spot with my story attached. And as long as that's happening, I can't ever come to confront my truth because it's shaded by my story. So just like a good coach in ayahuasca, what happens is that story is shed, and then we're forced to confront like, oh, I'm a thief, plain and simple. Not even I'm bad for it, just that's who I am. And then we have all our stories about it. So we come to that confrontation, and then once we've done that, we can kind of what we call merge back with our soul or have a breakthrough, which is we can kind of like, oh, I don't have to hold that part of me at bay for the rest of my life. I don't have to like convince myself I'm not a thief and hate other people for being a thief. I can just have compassion for the fact that sometimes I do that and sometimes these people do that. And then from there we can heal. We can create a transformation. And so ayahuasca walks people through that path. Death is a process that walks people through that path. And really profound coaching is a process that walks people through that path. And so that gives you like kind of a high level overview of the medicine and what it does, and then we can go anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, I think one of the first questions I have, and you may have answered it, is somebody who knows I know the basics about this space because of doing coaching work and knowing people like you that do this work. But the first thing that I am curious about is why is it called medicine? Because, well, yeah, because it's normally you'd say, oh, it's a hallucinogenic. In the United States, we would call that a drug, but it's called plant medicine, not a plant drug. So what is the delineation there? You may have mentioned it with the healing that happens in it, but how do you see it as why is it called a medicine and not a drug?
So in the West, we don't actually have a context for a medicine. We have, like you said, a context for a drug. And the nature of a drug is, one sec. Let that burp out. Somewhat off mic. The nature of a drug is that I will take it and it tends to like arrest my process. So if I'm anxious and I'm having a panic attack, I'll take an anti-anxiety and it'll kind of stop that process. Or if I have knee pain, I'll take that drug and it'll stop me feeling the pain of my knee and I can kind of do stuff. So the drug arrests your process to some extent. It doesn't heal you. It just brings you down to a point where you're kind of stable. And then hopefully you can get healed some other way. And in addition to that, the context of a drug includes that the more I take, the more I have to take subsequently to have the same experience. So we build a tolerance for the drug.
Mm-hmm.
And further, over time, I become dependent on that drug. I require it. And if you take it away from me, I have withdrawal. So these are all kind of the context for drugs. And this is often a concern people have when they see someone going and working with plant medicine. They're like, well, aren't you just getting addicted? Aren't you blah, 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 blah? Really valid questions, again, because we only have the context of drug. So what are you doing? You're going to the jungle and taking drug. And drug has some clear consequences. As an aside, people have the same sort of story about coaching. You've probably had this experience for people, like maybe if you talk to my dad or something, will be like, well, aren't you becoming
just as an
reliant
example
on your coach? Yeah, just by completely making it up.
Completely making it up.
But they'll have this like, don't you become dependent on your coach? Because again, that's the context we have for most help.
Yeah.
So the distinction between a drug and a medicine is what a medicine does is it supports you to like, it's something that supports you to actually heal yourself as opposed to simply arresting your process. So that would be like, let me try and find an example here.
Well, I've got an example for you.
Perfect.
If you,
yes,
something like a neosporin, something that you would put on a cut would be considered, and that is labeled, I believe, a medicine because it's helping speed up the healing process. I mean, it is stopping that process, but it's also aiding in getting healthier quicker.
Yeah.
From actually speeding up that process. A lot of drugs will help you to get healthy quicker, but it's because it's stopping the process so your immune system can then go and work on that thing.
So
I don't know if that's a good analogy or not.
Challenging, of course, because it kind of skirts a bit of both of those, right?
That's true, yeah.
But let's think of like an opioid. So an opioid stops our pain quite effectively. But then it doesn't do anything to like heal the thing causing the pain.
Yeah.
It sort of, in theory, can like let you kind of stabilize out and then you can seek out that support and blah, blah, blah. Whereas what a medicine will do, at least in this context we're creating for it, is support me to do the work I have to do to heal that part of myself that's causing the pain in the first place. And so that's what ayahuasca does. And it's a little hard for us in the West to kind of wrap our heads around that because, again, we only have the one context. So it's kind of like inviting fish to consider what it's like walking on land. Like, yeah, but I don't, but that's what we must do to really grasp it is like, no, this does something fundamentally distinct from what a drug does. There's some overlap, of course, there always will be, but it supports you to actually heal the underlying thing that's causing whatever pain or dis-ease you are feeling.
So my next question around this is, it's many people, I don't know if this is something you've done. I would assume it is, but I don't like to assume anything. Is this is something you can do over and over and over again. So, and you and your wife, you lead people on retreats to have a guided experience, especially for people maybe the first or second time. So what is the difference, or what happens the first time versus doing it maybe third or fourth or 10th time? Again, I think I'm in my drug context, right? Because the first time you do a drug, you're like, oh, well, I've never felt this before. The 10th time you do a drug, you might go, oh, I'm doing this because I know what it feels like. So what has that experience been like for you? Or for others that you've guided? Because, and Adam, one of the things to say, I believe you would say I'm going on a plant journey with a guide. So you consider yourself as somebody who's guiding people through this process, because it's not generally something you're going to do by yourself when you start.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's really important, actually. The tendency we have in the West is to look at everything through the scientific microscope, and then we lose you lose sight of the tapestry when you look at it through a microscope.
Yeah.
And ayahuasca in particular is a spiritual medicine. And so when people don't realize they're doing, they're like, I don't need all that ritual, and like, I could just get the thing and then take it myself. It'll be just as good. But that ritual protects you. It helps work with the medicine. So there is like something really important in that we lose when we Westernize it, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, and I teach some classes in service of this, and I drink the medicine myself, but I'm not someone serving the medicine. I'm very committed to working with shamans who are very deep in their work with this.
Yeah.
So to your question, which was like, first versus 10th, it's kind of like coaching, like you and I have had that first time someone really was able to point to something that we like in our blind spot. It's like, you'll never forget that moment. And you're just like, it's like for the
Yeah.
first time in 30 years of your life, you're seeing the thing you've been tripping over for 30 years of your life. You're just like gobsmacked, it's
It's
unbelievable.
not fun. It's not fun in the
No.
moment, but it's powerful.
Yeah, it's jarring. You're just like,
It's
oh
very
my God.
jarring. Yeah.
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 And I found in coaching each time that never stops. There's always new stuff I'm
Yeah.
tripping over, but the stuff has
Yeah.
become more and more subtle because I'm more and more masterful in my work and I've got more work under my belt. So it's like smaller, more nuanced things I'm tripping over. So every time I'm just as resistant. Every time I'm just like, holy crap. But it's not quite that humongous furry elephant that I first saw that I was tripping over. And I find plant medicine is quite similar in that regard. At first, it's just like, oh my goodness, this experience is wild and crazy. And then as time goes on, it can be a little bit less pronounced, a little bit less wild. And then the funny thing about it is the more you drink this medicine, the less resistant you are. Just like with coaching, the more we work with a coach, the more we're able to hear what they have to say. And we can therefore go deeper with that.
Yeah.
Because we have less in the way. And so ayahuasca is very similar to that. Like the more you drink, the less you require to go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Interesting. Which is the opposite of a drug
Exactly.
context. Interesting, right. Adam. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what for, otherwise known as why. So you mentioned some of the results people can expect to get. I guess where my mind is going is, and if you're willing to share, which knowing what I know of you, I think you'd be more than willing to share. What are some of the things that you've uncovered through your own journey? And if you'd be willing to share anything that, like, and keeping confidentiality, but anything anybody else has like uncovered that was probably not possible through traditional therapy, to call it out, coaching, because some of these things just like we're not even present to it. So love to hear some experiences you've had and any other, confidential examples of other things you've seen people go through.
Yeah, I'll share a story that was quite powerful for me. So, and I'm going to preface this by saying, like, I'll come back to this, but like a lot of people will report like, oh, ayahuasca is like doing 10 years of therapy in 1 week. And
I've heard that. Yeah.
And there's like this sort of implied line underneath that, which is like, and that's the way therapy should be. Like if therapy worked better, I don't think that's valid or true or accurate.
That's dangerous.
And it's like, it's 10 years of therapy in 1 week, but then you got to integrate 10 years of therapy. Whereas 10 years of therapy, you're integrating week by week. So it's not better or worse, it's just different. And sometimes we need to be jarred like that. And other times we really need the slow drip of like the therapy IV. So anyhow, we'll come back to that in a sec. But like one of the things for me that I've been working on all my life has been my sexuality. And I grew up in a house that was very like kind of open about sexuality, but then there was like almost underneath that like a prudishness that was hard to put your finger on. And what I witnessed would be like, sex is okay and we can talk about it openly, but then let's make fun of that guy over there who's blatantly checking out that girl, or maybe not even blatantly, just checking that girl out. He's an object of derision. And so as a result, my sexuality became this thing that was like it was like, okay, but then a little bit to be ashamed of. And that was part of it. And then it was also like, and here you are just being like every other friggin' guy. So there's that part. So there's like and then my perfectionism got wrapped up into it as well. So as a man who has a big impact just in his energy, one of the things I fear is the fact that I'm a disappointment. Someone that makes a big entrance is going to also naturally leave people disappointed. Because they're like, this will be sweet. And then sometimes he strikes out at bat. I'm so disappointed. And so to counteract that, I learned to become perfectionistic, and that got wrapped up into my sexuality as well. So you've got this dude who's like kind of ashamed a little bit of his sexuality, really loves women and wants to look at them, but then feels that that's really wrong. So it has to come out sideways. And then on top of that, perfectionistic, doesn't want to be a disappointment, terrified of being a disappointment. And so what happened in my life was basically meet my need for sexuality, like my sexual needs myself, for masturbating, in case anyone didn't figure out that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Yeah.
Can you say more? Yeah. So meet my needs by myself, and then be in like these great relationships with amazing, beautiful women, but like there would not be any sex. There'd not be any intimacy. And so that existed in pretty much every relationship I've ever been in. And like what would typically happen is our relationships over time would just sort of like trail away until we both just kind of walked away from them. You know, it was like there was no dramatic breakup. There was nothing big like that, because it was just sort of like a shrug of the shoulders, like, oh, no, whatever. See you later.
Yeah.
Because intimacy wasn't present. And everything I've described applies, of course, to sex, but also to intimacy across the board. So, you know, there's all range, emotional, energetic. So I'd been working on this for years and years and years. I'd worked on this with coaches. I'd worked on this with counselors. I'd worked on this with like embodiment practitioners, men's work practitioners. And Bay and I, for the last probably 4 years, have worked with some incredible world-class teachers in this art we would call sacred yoga. Sacred yoga is like kind of a two-body, an easy way to think about it might be like tantric practice. And they've done amazing work with us, like so many breakthroughs. But still, there was this part of me that was like really reticent to be let out. There was like a part of my ferocity as a man and a sexual being was still held and caged. Is this tracking so far? Am I making sense?
Yeah. Definitely tracks.
So we were down in Costa Rica. We were working with a man named Taito Juanito, who is the father, the lineage's father of the medicine that we drink. He's from this place in Colombia. You got to take like a boat up the river to get there. He's trained all of the people at Rhythmia, which is where we work and where we bring people. He's like really the guardian of the lineage. And we are so fortunate to get to work with this guy. It's just like an unbelievable honor and gift. And he's this just random dude who's a nut job. He's hilarious. He's super reverent for creation and totally irreverent. And he's always laughing. And anyway, he's a real goober. And so this was the first time we were ever drinking with him. And we'd been told like it's a very powerful experience. And I was like, yeah, I've drunk a fair bit. We'll see. And so what happened was I drank this medicine, and typically you drink the medicine, you sit for about 2 hours, they serve the second cup, and then the night starts to pick up. And with him, I drank that first cup, and pretty quickly the maloka, the sacred space, started to get like noisy and loud, and you can hear people maybe purging, or some people are laughing, and a woman next to me was talking in like Russian, I think, and it was driving me nuts. I was like, oh God, the space cadet next to me won't shut up. And so I went outside to the hammocks that are on property. You can go and sit in these hammocks, which is beautiful to look at the stars, you know, in the middle of the night. And I sat there. And as I sat there, my sexuality kind of like took a hold of me in a way that I pretty much never allowed it. You know, I always had control over this part of me. And it was like, there was no controlling this. I was just swept away in like the fire of sexuality, turn on. And I was, you know, moving around in my mind, like performing acrobatic sexual acts on this hammock. And this one of the medicine team, you're very held at this place. One of the medicine team came up to me and said, brother, breathe, calm down, breathe. Just kind of bringing me down because my energy was very high.
Yeah.
And of course I'm like, who's this woman interrupting my sex? That was kind of the thought. I'm like, what are you doing here? You're not meant to be here. Get out of here. But she did that. She laid me down on the grass, and then she asked me my name, and then she said, I'll be right back. And she left, and then boom, I was swept right back into it. And I was so like, I guess we could call it like unconsciously in this experience, that it wasn't until I didn't kind of come back into the conscious moment until someone said, Adam, pull up your pants. And I realized like my pants were down, and I'm like, who knows what I'm doing? I'm rolling around on the grass. And in that moment, all of the shame that I had, all of the shame that like these sort of perfectionistic hold this stuff in check was designed to never have me have to experience, came to the surface.
Yeah.
Like, boom. Oh my God, I'm that guy. I'm the very guy that I've spent 35, 6, 7, 8, whatever years of my life slaying, making sure he never comes out, castrating him so he can't be present.
Yeah.
And so I was like ashamed, and they walked me, one of my friends who works there walked me, said, he was very, very good with me. He said, you know, you're doing great work. I love you. I am your friend. You don't have to worry. You're doing great. Of course, I'm very tender at this point because I've just smacked the wall of my shame. And he's sharing this with me. And as he is, the fascinating thing is I can feel that turn on pulling at me. like a siren's call. And I'm trying to listen to him, but I'm also being swept back away. And I'm like, frig, what's going to happen next? It's very scary.
Yeah.
And so over that night, like I kept asking for help. I kept getting help. I really worked with this, and it was really a practice in me learning how to like, and I've been working with this over the months since. This probably happened maybe 7-8 months ago. And the work is often like, okay, the first step was to let that animal out of the cage, and like there was nothing I was going to be able to do to control it. It's like, well, put a leash on him and what? No. I was so atrophied in my ability to be with this part of myself. There was no leashing it. Just sort of like, oh, well, take the dam away from the Niagara Falls for a little bit. And no, it's going to cause some havoc at first. And then over time, learning to calibrate this part of myself so it can be existent without being like neutered and dead on arrival or causing all the problems that it was causing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start to wind this down here. The potency of that experience, I could have created that kind of, and I had been edging towards that through like my work with our teachers, through my work with my coach, our work with our counselors, stuff like that. But there's this saying that you can get anywhere with a series of steps, but sometimes you have to cross a chasm, and you can't get across a chasm in 2 steps. And so that was where the gift in that case of ayahuasca really supported me, because it really like, all right, buddy, you got to jump. That's the only way to deal with this.
Yeah. And by jumping, you end up rolling around in the grass with your pants down.
Yes, highly recommended.
Highly recommended. So Adam, what has been the impact? You're a married guy. What's been the impact for both you and for your wife getting to have that experience and to move towards that? That has to be a monumental impact. And I would imagine any man out there listening, probably, like, I'm listening and I'm like, oh man, so much of that resonates for me, and the way you're raised and just all those different things. What's been the impact for you living in this world now since going through that experience?
Yeah, it's been like, well, the first thing is there's been like some really interesting parts, peripheral. These are like the almost like the icing on the cake. But like after that, I noticed I started getting checked out way more, because that part of me
checked
was
out.
Yeah, which was kind of confronting. I was like, oh, I'm not sure what to do with this. These are women that so there was like learning how to like allow this part of me to be alive, but then to be responsible and clean and an integrity around it, because what I want to do is bring all of this to my woman. And at first, as is always the case, when we unlock something new like this, we're not, or at least I'm not, very good at being clean and responsible with it. So my energy was probably pretty messy and a bit sloppy and unclean. And then what that then allowed, now the impact is it's opened the gate to start to bring all of this to bear and to be focused on my woman, who I love very much, and to allow like the fire of our sexuality to exist between the two of us. Whereas historically, I think what I was really doing was like killing the part of me that had any interest in other women, so that I was totally committed to my woman. But the impact of that was that there was nothing there. I was dry and desiccated. So it's really opened like a wellspring between us. And it's kind of, it's like we always had, a couple of great cars, but now it's filled our tanks with gas, and we can go a lot further in our work together. All of our sacred intimacy practice and stuff has a lot more ground to like chew into and to move forward and stuff.
That's beautiful. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for the vulnerability. There's a lot in there. I think this says a lot about your character and who you are, which is one of the many reasons where you're back on. Is I'm like, whatever Adam's going to bring is going to be juicy. There's things that we just discussed there that have never been discussed in over 200 episodes here, and I love it. So thank you for sharing your experience. I'd love to hear maybe some anecdotal. What have you seen other people go through? Because I'm sure everybody has. I mean, I think I would assert that almost everybody has what you just said. We all have something like that inside of us. Men, women, non-binary. It doesn't really matter. Everybody's got something around sex and sexuality. Normal. What are some other topics that people have breakthroughs around?
Excuse me. So one of the things we always do, I teach plant integration classes, and the intention is that in between, there's 4 nights of drinking ceremony, and then there's breath work on either side of those. In between those 4 nights, I teach a class called plant integration, the intention being to help people find their footing and understand like where they are in their process, And really, I believe in my heart to be reminded they're doing a great job. Because we are like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm screwing this up. It's not true at all, but that's what we do. And then that story takes over. And then sure enough, we don't get what we want. So in those classes, one of the things we always ask is like, who's feeling angry? Who's feeling sad? We go through a list. Who's feeling anxious? Who's feeling scared? Who's feeling blah? Who's feeling blah? And people put up their hands, and they're like, in the moment, they're usually disempowered by that fact. They're glad that they can out themselves, but they're like, oh, yeah, here I am angry with these other 12 people. This program sucks. Oh, I feel sad. I feel scared. I'm not doing it right. I'm doing it wrong. And what this medicine does, just like good coaching does, is it's not making us feel angry or sad. We have felt angry and sad for decades. And what we have is a story that feeling that way is wrong, right?
Yeah.
And then we push that down below the surface of our consciousness, so we don't have to be conscious of the fact that we feel that way. And then we drink, we eat, we do all this sort of stuff. And so this medicine and good coaching is bringing it up to the surface of our consciousness so that we can actually heal it for the first time. So for the first time in 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, however long, we're holding the thing that has always been there. And at first we're like, I'm doing it wrong. I shouldn't feel this way. But it's like, no, you were doing profound work. So to your question, I often see people like transform their relationship to like part of the abundance of their emotional state. So maybe
that's beautiful.
They were, told they always had to be joyful. And so they could never be angry and sad. And now they have access to that part of their state. It's like, oh my God, there's so much freedom available in that. So that's a really big one. And there's one other I'd like to share, but I want to give you a chance to get a word in.
I like to. No, I think that's beautiful. That like I stand for, and I think most coaches that we know, we stand for people to be themselves. And like, I think you and I are aligned on this, is that the best version of us is the true us out in the world. And the true us is never all joyful or all angry. And I don't even call it light and dark. It's just like being our best and most enlightened version is all of us together. And then, like you said, it's then doing what you did. How do I channel this thing into the things that I love, that I know are going to be in integrity? Because I think most of the problems in the world are from people channeling those things into things that are out of integrity for them.
Yeah.
And so,
totally.
Just beautiful. Continue.
So then the other thing that's really shifted for me was all my life, I've had, like, I guess we could call it struggles with like addiction of various sorts. So when I was young, I was pot, and that one took forever to release. It took me many, many years. And that was sort of like the closest. I picked pot up at the youngest age, and it was attached again to my sexuality that was developing. So of course it's going to be very sticky. But then I had like an awkward, challenging relationship with alcohol, which looked like a sawtooth wave. I'd like drink a bit, drink a bit more, drink a bit more. Oh my God, I'm drinking all the time. Stop. And then a little bit of break, and then repeat. That's the way that looked. And likewise with food, I have had a real sweet tooth, and I would really like, I always played like a lot of sports, in part to manage the glutton that I was. So it's like, as long as I like get out and run enough, then I can kind of deal with the fact that I'm eating 3 bowls of granola as a snack. It's just like crazy. I found out.
Hey, hold on a minute, Adam. I have to pause you for a minute. You're a glutton for sweets, and then you said 3 bowls of granola. I'm like, people are like, I eat a whole chocolate cake, or like you're like 3 bowls of granola. That is it's all in perspective. I love that. That's a great example.
You got to look at like the calories in granola. It's crazy.
Totally,
it's like
it is crazy
calories. I was like,
it is
it's healthy
healthy
because it's clustered grains or
you're
something.
You're like, I'm not eating like a whole pound of M&Ms or Skittles. It's just granola, but it's still a lot of calories.
Yeah. So anyhow, most recently I've been doing work around this, and one of the things that the medicine often brings me, she brings us just like, here's the experience you need to be set free. And more particularly, it's like, here's the experience you spend most of your time avoiding. And so that can be frustrating. We'll sit and drink the medicine and nothing happens, and we're bored. And it's like, yo, that's your medicine. You avoid just sitting in stillness. You have no capacity to just be. And so she often brings that to me, so I can run fast. And over maybe the last 2 months or so, I've been really sitting with like that. And the beautiful thing about this medicine is she, the spirit of the medicine, Mother Ayahuasca, we call her, you can ask
Mm-hmm.
her for support. You can be like, hey, what's going on? And so I
Yeah.
was sitting there, I asked her, what's going on? She said, you're slowly opening and you're impatient with your tempo. Like you want to go faster, but this is the speed at which you're actually willing to open. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so I slowed down and I sat. And as I started to like slow down and not let go of my desire for the experience to be something else, what I started to feel was like sadness. And then as I started to feel that, really profound heartbreak. And I'm not going to go too much into the details of how this worked, but as I like continue to sit with that and let myself feel the immensity of the heartbreak I was feeling, what I saw was, oh, wow, I use food to not have to feel this way.
Mm.
And so the move there, the incredible transformation is to like, if I can let myself feel heartbroken, which is again, just part of being a human. If you
Yeah.
look into the world, it's a heartbreaking place. It's not hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can let myself feel that, then never again do I have to manage it. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you, the last 2 months have been so different because I have fruit in my fridge and I don't really binge. I eat like a single piece of chocolate for dessert at night rather than like
Mm-hmm.
crushing a bag of M&Ms.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't drunk for 2 months and it's not been really like, I've not been forcing it or like bending my elbow to like create some structure to make sure I don't. Like
Yeah.
all of that stuff has kind of fallen away and it exists as a choice. I went away with my friends for a annual weekend. I chose to drink that trip, but other than that, it's
Sure.
just like those cravings have lost so much of their power. And so that's like a fascinating kind of way that some of
Mm.
this work can end up healing us.
Yeah, I've read that sometimes people will do it as part of their overcoming addiction of some type, like actual chemical addiction, because a
Yes.
lot of that stems from what you just said. It actually stems from an emotional state that you're masking.
Yeah.
So, Adam, let's talk about resources, education, people that are interested. Maybe they're not ready to go do it yet, or they're wondering. Well, like I'm going to throw this back over to you. What are some
Mhm.
things that you think people should know that you get asked about? Because you actually take people on trips, you enroll people in this. I'm sure they have questions. What are some things that you get asked or that you think people should know about as they may be considering doing a plant journey at some point?
Yeah. I think it's really important to recognize there's a shadow side to this work. And our shadow is like any time our ego gets the best of us, basically. And what our ego's
Yeah.
job to do is to fear the unknown and keep us here in what's safe. And so the way that works in plant medicine is like people get into this belief like, I don't need more support. I've drunk medicine 20, 30, 40, however many times. I'm ready to start serving other people. And then what that presents is this like compelling opportunity. Like you don't have to leave your neighborhood and you can get the gift of this medicine. And you don't have to listen to the bullshit like spirituality and like the lineage and the talks that the shamans will provide. You don't have to do any of that. It's kind of like a shortcut, right? And it requires you leaving your Western context a little bit less. And I think it's really important in approaching this medicine that we relate to it as a spiritual medicine, which again, that's two contexts that we don't have in the West, right? A medicine
Totally.
and a spiritual one.
Well, Americans, Indians, Native Americans, Indians definitely had the concept of spiritual medicine.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think like it's really important to consider that like the stuff that we would kind of by default discard or assume doesn't have value actually is super, super, super important. And like whenever you're going to find someone, you want to know like what's the lineage of this medicine? What's the lineage of the person that's serving it? Are they trained? Like, and ultimately in your heart, does this feel good? And those are like super important questions to ask. And I'll say like the place we bring people, Rhythmia in Costa Rica, we really like because they've done the impossible, which is jump through, you don't even know how many hoops to get licensed federally by the Costa Rican government. So there's nowhere else in the world where medically someone is licensed this way to serve this kind of medicine, which is just such a gift. And so it's on the more expensive side. But what I love about their work is that they've surrounded that process, that medicine with like so much safety and security and support and healing so that you really have a pristine space in which to do your medicine. And I would say
Yeah.
to anyone, like, make sure it's a pristine space. Like, are you cared for?
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question was going to be, this is obviously a fast growing space in terms of the marketing and things. What are things that people need to be aware of about the space overall? Maybe some of the downsides.
Yeah. Like, one of the things that I see neglected the most, and this even exists kind of in the indigenous cultures, because in the indigenous culture, you drink the medicine and then you stay in your tribe. And so you're still in the context, whereas that's not how it works in the West. In the West, we drink the medicine, then we go back home and we return to the me-shaped hole that I left. So that energetic shape I was before I left, that's there waiting for me. And of course, that's going to nudge me out and back to the way I was before I left. And so I think integration is really, really important and oft kind of stepped over, because what happens is people go, they spend a week doing this work and they have such a life-changing experience. They're left in the belief, nothing's going to take this away from me. And that's reinforced sometimes by the people that hold that space. And in fact, like, yeah, there's some truth to that, but it's also important to recognize how powerful you are all the time, and that you shaped the world that you left, and that world is now going to shape you. That's constantly happening. We're shaping the world around us and it's shaping us. And so it can be really valuable to like, make sure you talk when you go and do this work, to like talk about what you can do to serve your integrative process, to reach out to practitioners that do this kind of work so that you can like have someone to talk. And bar none, in my experience, the very best support you can have is working with a coach. And so like, I love that I have a coach, because I come back and I share with her all of this stuff, because it's a little bit embarrassing sometimes. So one, there's just someone that can listen to me very well. And then two, she can help me like see the connections between what I did there and what I've been working on in my life, and then help me sort of weave that into the tapestry of my life going forward. And that just makes this work so much richer.
Yeah.
Because, sorry, I just realized one last thought here.
Yeah.
Because one of my teachers says, you can drink all the medicine in the jungle, and if you don't put it into effect in your life, you're wasting your time. It's not worth it. Yeah.
Just like therapy and coaching and any personal development, professional development anybody's ever done. Insights without action, who cares?
Yes, exactly. It's
who cares?
But
it's really fun to it's like, no, what's like knowing is half the battle. Like knowing, and my experience with knowing with professional and personal development in any way, shape, or form, knowing is about 10% of the battle. You're like, yep, I know that thing about me. Like your thing is like, I know that I have this deep sexual thing that's being repressed. Okay, great. So you know that, Adam. Wonderful. Now you go back to doing what you're doing all the other time. Who cares? Like then you just get, my experience is, and maybe this is a good place to wrap for today, is that if you do this work, but you don't actually do anything with it, like tangibly, or create different ways of being, is it's actually more painful, because then you're just aware of some other crap that's just maybe you don't like about yourself or that stinks. And then you start to know, well, I could do that thing that could make me better, or make my wife, or make my marriage better, or my business better, or make more money, whatever you care about. But now I know it's there, but I'm still not doing anything about it versus it. So, I mean, let's be, ignorance is bliss is there for a reason.
Yes.
It's wonderful to have blind spots, and we all have them. All of us have them. Is you're like, yeah, I don't really need to know about it. But like once you know about it, then you're like, well, I know about it, but I'm still not going to do anything about it. You're like, oh, that's a painful experience.
I'm just seeing how I'm falling short over and over. In Zen, they have
now I just get to judge myself even more harshly that I'm not doing anything about the thing I know that's a shortcoming of mine.
Yeah. In Zen, they have a saying regarding the journey of consciousness. They say, better not to start, but once started, better to finish. And of course, there is no finishing, but like what they're really saying is like, once you're in this, you're in it. You're not going to stop halfway. You're better off.
No. The path. Yeah. Well, Adam, we'll obviously put in the show notes resources. I know you write a lot about this, and your wife does as well. What are some other thought leaders that you really respect in this space? And we can put a link in the show notes where people want to do some reading, because I want to make sure that for those interested in this topic, which I would assume if you're listening to this still, you're interested, who are some reliable and trusted sources that people could go and read more about this if they're thinking about exploring the idea of plant medicine, taking a journey, etc.
Yeah, so a lot of like Carlos Castaneda's writing is very, very, very good. It's not usually, I don't think he worked more with mescalito as he called it, but his writing has a lot of like, you'll get an understanding of the grounding of plant medicine in general through his writing. Jerry Powell, who is the CEO of Rhythmia, the founder of
Mm-hmm.
Rhythmia, has an
Mm-hmm.
incredible story and is like very deep in the medicine himself. And I really recommend people go and check out his work. You can even just look up like Jerry with a G, Gerry's
Mm-hmm.
story, maybe put ayahuasca there.
Yeah.
And there's like countless videos of him talking about it. It's such a good story. And then some other people that are like great. Another one would be John Jacob Mubarak, JJ Mubarak, who is he's also a coach. He does a lot of work with Michael Beckwith and also works
Mm-hmm.
in Rhythmia, and he's very, very deep in his work. And finally, I would suggest people follow along with Michael Beckwith, who's not
Yeah.
traditionally like related to plant medicine, although does do work with it. But he's
Mm-hmm.
just like, one of the things I find it can be helpful is to look at this stuff from many, many different facets. And even
Sure.
if we don't think we're learning about plant medicine, you actually are, because what you're
Yeah.
learning about in plant medicine is your soul. So that would
Yeah.
be the last person.
Yeah. Amazing, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing, you and Bay lead these retreats, and you mentioned you have one in January. How often do you do them? How often do you like to take people to Costa Rica? And do you recommend that people start coming? Like, I guess my last question about this as a potential consumer of the service. This is a service in a way, right? It's a service,
Mm-hmm.
just like you would hire a coach or hire a therapist.
Yeah.
How do you know when it's your time? Like, how do you know, like, hey, I want to do this once, and then you do it? Is there any way to recommend people like you should do it every so often? Is it more, how do you internally know that it's your time? It's kind of like, how do I know I should hire a coach? How do I know I should go see a therapist? Because some therapists will say, hey, you're doing great. I don't know that there's a lot to work on. I would assert that this is probably an example where there's always more. There's always more to chip away at it and cover.
Yeah. I have two answers. So the first one is ultimately what these processes all do is they help us come to a place of trusting our intuition better and better and better, and better being able to discern our intuition from our fear. Because that can be tough at
Ooh.
first. Like, we're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, my
Ooh, it's
intuition is
tough.
telling me to stop working with this coach. Yeah, because your coach is helping you confront what's scary, and that's actually your fear tricking you. But
Yeah.
so they help us do that. And so the best, ultimately, like it's a big sounding word, but I think it's the right one. It's kind of holographic, meaning the best way often is just to like trust you feeling called into it. So there'll be people listening to this are like, man, this is really resonating for me, and I really think maybe that's what I want to do. That's you being called into it. And so one, you can trust that. You can work with that. And then two, this answer is not mine, but a teacher of mine, a man named Mitra. And the way he was describing it is, anytime you go into the world and do like, a silent retreat, maybe a coaching session, webinar thing, ayahuasca, iboga, any of these other plant medicines, whatever it is, you'll go away and you'll have this experience. And at that end of that experience, you'll be vibrating at a very high level. And you'll come back to life, and you'll feel your life start to kind of rise up to meet this new vibration. And there comes this point over time where you start to peak, and then you can start to feel yourself moving back on the downslope. And this, of course, requires a bit of consciousness. But he says, when you start to feel that downslope, that's when it's time to book the next thing, so that you can kind of continue to engage in more and more support. And we do the best we can. Maybe it takes like a cycle where you spent 2 years in that downslope before you realize, oh crap, I really missed it by 2 years. That's okay. You're learning to find yourself in your process.
Yeah.
So that's another good way to kind of track this stuff.
Beautiful. All this is going to be in the show notes. Adam, I want to thank you so much for having you on again. We were planning to maybe talk about some other things, but then as it usually goes, like here we are at 50 minutes. Brilliant. I personally learned a ton. Hope you enjoyed sharing with us. Really appreciate your vulnerability as always. Have you back on again soon. Everything's going to be in the show notes. Adam, any last parting thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, it really simply, like, the longer I'm in this work, the more I learn you're doing great. And that sounds trite. We have to look to see that truth, but it's actually true if we are willing to look for it. And so I just want to acknowledge every single one of your audience members, like, way to go listening to this podcast. And like, all of it is leading to whatever's next, that leads to whatever healing there is to do. And so, like, just way to go you, way to go us. Yeah, we're doing great.
What is the Buddhist? It's like the path to enlightenment. Enlightenment starts with admitting we know nothing. Is that what it is? I love that. You're like, all the expertise, all the things in the world that we can learn from, all the coaches, teachers, consultants, therapists, all the gazillion ways we can learn all these things. Then you go, Oh, yeah. I actually don't really know anything still.
Yeah. Oh, freedom.
Freedom. Adam, my
Uh-huh.
brother, it's always good to have you on. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.